Picture yourself standing near a door, tapping your foot like a metronome, glancing at your phone for the umpteenth time. The person you were set to meet, still MIA. And silently you mutter, "They're late again," punctuated with a sigh or a sardonic smile. Lateness, it's like that pesky fly buzzing around. It seems trivial until you begin to notice it's a universal theme in everyone's story. Funny, isn't it? Everyone knows a perpetually tardy friend or, if we're honest, maybe that friend ourselves. Hey everyone, welcome to Psychologist Jeep, the cozy corner of the internet for overthinkers, quiet observers, and those who treat time on the way as a flexible emotional statement rather than a timestamp. If you're the kind of person who always leaves home exactly when you should already be there, don't worry, you're among your people. Before we begin, take a second to like the video, share it with a friend who's 5 minutes away, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from or your honest take on why you think you're always late. Now let's dive deeper because, newsflash, lateness isn't merely about those ticking clocks or fashionably late arrivals. At its core, it dances to a psychological tune. It's woven with emotions and self-identity, a quirky reflection of how individuals interact with both themselves and the world around them. If you've spent time with a latecomer, those recurring moments of tardiness must feel like an uncomfortable echo, hinting at something more profound lurking down below the surface. Chronic lateness has less to do with the physical passage of time and more with the invisible internal clocks ticking at wildly different tempos. There are those who rush through life as if it's a race against an invisible stopwatch, while others saunter along, unbothered, treating time like a soothing river. Then, you have those stuck in the limbo of a tug-of-war between feeling the pressure to hurry and the urge to take it slow. This blend is the secret recipe for those who just can't seem to make it on time, and frankly, there's something beautifully tragic about that. For the late folks, it's not a deliberate choice to keep you waiting. It's their internal battle playing out. You see, they might not wake up thinking, "Let's throw off someone's schedule today." More often than not, they're grappling with a mix of pressures, hopes, and a rather poignant desire for just a pinch more space before plunging into the day ahead. If you can picture their mornings, you might just catch a glimpse behind the curtain of their dilatory ways. Imagine the scenario, a person rising from bed with the conviction that time is their trusty ally. They go through a morning routine at leisurely speed, weaving quick pep talks into the mix, thinking everything will just click into place. Suddenly, they're hit with a mental avalanche of emails, messages, or half-forgotten tasks. "I can squeeze this in," they think. But as always, good old time has a sneaky way of slipping through fingers like sand. Psychologists label this as emotional miscalculation. It's a unique cocktail where one's perception of time is based more on hopeful intentions rather than stubborn reality. It's like planning to catch a flight, banking on no traffic or last-minute hiccups along the way. Unfortunately, life loves throwing curveballs, and those consistently late folks seem to live in a world where reality plays nice, or at least, they wish it would. However, this isn't sloppiness. It's rather just a kooky form of optimism, albeit at times overly generous. At the end of the day, understanding your perpetually late friend requires a sprinkle of empathy. Life can be challenging, and some folks juggle the emotional weight of high expectations and unfounded optimism. They might not see the clock the same way you do, but surely it's a wild adventure navigating their rhythmic lag. So, the next time you find yourself waiting on someone, maybe just take a moment, envision their chaotic yet well-meaning morning struggle, and chuckle. After all, time is just a suggestion, right? Being habitually late is like having a secret world inside those who struggle with it, a hidden layer of emotional chaos. It's not just about mishandling a schedule, but rather wrestling with emotional transitions. Picture someone deeply engrossed in an activity they love, then being yanked away by time like a balloon suddenly popped. Conversely, when facing stressful tasks, the mental leap into action can feel like trying to jump over a canyon. These folks are indeed operating in their own time warp. Every little transition in their day may feel like an epic challenge. From getting out of bed to wrapping up a chat, each moment requires a negotiation with themselves, often leading to unexpected delays. Suddenly, those few seconds of hesitation pile up into a mountain of minutes, tapping on the door of tardiness. So when they say, "I didn't mean to be late," they genuinely mean it. But that doesn't take the sting out of being the last one at the party, right? Now, consider the social impact of being late. It carries an emotional tonnage that's hard to shake off. It can feel like a personal slight, a tiny promise broken, even when the intention was as pure as a fresh batch of cookies. What underlies this chronic struggle is often not sheer disrespect, but more so a heavy pile of self-pressure, overcommitment, and anxiety about disappointing others. The clock is unforgiving, and the desire to be everyone's superhero can easily get them tangled up in time. Perfectionists are often the latecomers tweaking minor details instead of stepping out the door. They want to show up looking sharp and ready to dazzle, but that last-minute polish turns into a time thief. Instead of lack of care, it's a case of caring just a bit too much in the wrong instance, the result being a clock that refuses to cooperate. Meanwhile, some just can't face their fears, slowing down as they navigate anxiety like turtles in a marathon. Ever met a dreamer? These folks float through life with spectacular ideas, blissfully ignorant of time sneaking up on them. They get lost in thought, their imaginations painting worlds far more significant than the ticking clock. So, while they might not have an eye on the hour, it doesn't mean they disregard it. They simply live in a realm where reality bends to their dreams. It's charming until they arrive an hour late with an incredible story of how they saved the universe. In their head. Then come those poor souls weighed down with overwhelming responsibilities. Their lives resemble a juggling act gone wrong, and eventually, the act of keeping it all together results in habitual tardiness. They rush out, breathless and guilty, when they should be relaxed and on time. There's something in their gaze, a mix of fatigue and determination, battling the constant battle against the ticking clock. Wanting to do it all and yet feeling like they're forever lagging, that's a daily tug of war. Finally, consider those who grew up in a world with a different sense of time. For some, deadlines and punctuality weren't as sacred, leading them to perceive the clock differently. They carry this laid-back perspective into adulthood, a swirling blend of nostalgia and chaos. Amidst the noise, laughter, and unexpected lateness, sometimes love gets wrapped in those minutes, whether they wish it or not. And in the grand scheme of life, it's one amusing, albeit chaotic, adventure that we can all chuckle at. Maybe their home was a whirlwind of chaos, a place where routines were flexibly interpreted and clocks merely suggested when to show up. As adults, they carry that same carefree attitude toward time, not by choice but because that's the rhythm of their upbringing. In this fluctuation, there's a hint of rebellion, albeit a subtle one, a quiet declaration against being constantly herded by schedules and expectations as if growing up under a magnifying glass. For some, being late has an emotional weight. It comes from underestimating time and undervaluing self-worth. They tumble into tasks thinking, "I can totally pull this off quickly," all while fearing the small failures looming beneath. Rushing into projects, they juggle balls they can barely keep in the air, smoothing out imperfections in the mirror till they realize they're running late. Trying to be perfect often leads only to being perpetually behind schedule in the most comical of ironies. Maybe you've been there, waiting anxiously for someone to arrive, often dreaming of clocks that could stop. Or perhaps you've been the one zooming in, breathless, apologizing profusely and feeling like you've walked onto a stage for a play you missed the first act of. The deeper truth looms like a giant clock, suggesting that chronically late folks often don't value punctuality. Instead, they treasure comfort, approval, or even the fleeting quiet that allows for emotional processing, a sneaky negotiation with time to tend to more urgent needs. Unravel that further, and you'll find many latecomers are full of hopes that time will stretch as they believe they can accomplish the impossible. Today, things will go flawlessly. Traffic will be my friend. They say, convinced this time will be different. That positivity, while charming in its naivety, is also the joker in their punctuality deck. Each too late arrival becomes a rerun of a familiar show hope followed by regret playing out quietly in their heads as self-doubt slips in. And it's not just about the minutes and seconds, there's a heavy emotional toll in their late entrances. With every "sorry, I'm late," lingers a whisper of disappointment at themselves. They become frustrated with their inability to meet expectations, often feeling misunderstood. Their lateness rarely has anything to do with lack of care, more with an internal dance that doesn't match external clocks. Intriguingly, those who seem chronically late are likely to be among the most sincere and loyal people you could know. They show up emotionally when it matters, keep memories alive through thoughtful gestures, and are there for friends when times get tough. But how they dance through life doesn't always reflect their hearts. It's merely a blip in the slow waltz of their internal timing against the backdrop of the world's punctuality. Peeling back one final layer reveals a bright hopefulness that clings to many who are late. Next time, they promise, a mantra echoing in their minds as they rush out the door. This continuous optimism is the fuel that propels them forward, even as time slips through their fingers. Yet, until they confront the layers underneath their relationship with time, the ticking clock will remain an elusive companion forever teasing but never truly understood. Lateness is a polarizing issue, isn't it? It can provoke some pretty wild emotions, both for those who are tardy and for the unfortunate souls stuck waiting. The concept of time is a precious gift we bestow upon others, with each minute brimming with potential. When someone arrives late, it feels like tossing a pebble into a still pond. Suddenly, the ripples arise, distorting what was once calm. Lateness isn't a betrayal. It's more like a slight twist where earnest intentions collide with real-life chaos. At the core of this conundrum, lateness isn't rooted in a lack of respect, but rather in a mind caught in a dance with itself. Have you ever noticed how some people juggle their lives, trying to catch up, slow down, or wiggle into whatever rhythm feels comfortable? They may seem to be ignoring the clock, but they're really battling with their own internal dynamics. This creates a striking contrast against the world's rigid structure, leading to those familiar awkward moments when plans derail. Digging a little deeper into the lives of the perpetually late reveals a fascinating insight. It often represents how they navigate their emotional landscape. Some folks level up life as if following a gentle stream, while others ride the high and low tides of emotional waves. Those who consistently find themselves behind typically live those waves, balancing between intensity and calm. Their clocks are ticking, but only in harmony with their emotional states, utterly detached from traditional timelines. Now, many think simply nudging someone to set an alarm earlier will do the trick. Spoiler alert: it usually doesn't. The heart of the issue lies buried in their intricate internal world, where thoughts cloud judgment and expectations loom heavy. For many, time transforms into a race against the clock, while for others, it becomes more of a laid-back suggestion. For the frequent latecomers, however, it morphs into an evolving storyline, each chapter hoping for that elusive happy ending. Picture this: someone about to leave home, eyeing the ticking clock, fully aware that it's time to go. But then, bam, a thought dives in, pulling their attention elsewhere. Then that pesky distraction makes an appearance from yesterday, suddenly clamoring for today's focus. I can wrap this up in a jiffy, they tell themselves, yet before they know it, minutes have slipped away like sand through their fingers. And then there's the realization, the stomach-dropping moment when they acknowledge, oh no, I'm running late. Instantly, their heart races, and the rush sets in. Zooming out of the door, there's that familiar promise made, perhaps this time will be different. But it's a cyclical routine, almost a dance they perform, and beneath this repetitive waltz often lies an unspoken anxiety regarding being early. The mere thought of arriving too soon sends shivers down their spine. Being early might scream over eager or too available, so they chase that sweet spot of showing up at just the right moment. Unfortunately, that perfect timing is far more delicate than they think, easily disrupted by the tiniest hiccup in their day. Then you have others who perceive time differently and live in moments rather than mere minutes, savoring experiences rather than adhering to schedules. For some, their lives unfold like a gripping survival game rather than an orderly sequence of events. The clock becomes a distant companion, gradually slipping into the background as they careen through their days. It's a wild ride where structure is swapped for instinct, and while it may lead to arriving fashionably late, the journey itself can be captivatingly chaotic. When life throws stress, responsibilities, and worries into the mix, time seems to sprint ahead as if it's training for a marathon. It's just like those days when you have a million thoughts buzzing around your head, and suddenly, you look up, and hours have vanished like a magician's disappearing act. That cognitive overload creates a time warp where every tick of the clock feels exaggerated, leaving a perfectly sane person questioning where the day went. Now, let's chat about lateness and the unspoken fears that tag along. It's not always about being irresponsible. There's a quiet, sneaky fear lurking behind those extra minutes, fear of judgment from the audience, your friends or colleagues, dread of those awkward moments when you walk in late, an anxiety that brews just thinking about disappointing others. Sometimes, for those latecomers, waiting is like building a protective bubble that shields them from the impending social hurricane. But it gets even more complicated. Some habitual late folks aren't just dragging their feet, they use the time as a safe space for themselves. It's like they've carved out their own cozy retreat where they can breathe, think, or finish that one tiny task that insists on being completed before facing the great unknown of social interaction. Their lateness transforms into an emotional life vest they cling to before diving into the chaos of others' expectations. If you observe a late person closely, you might uncover some hidden gems beneath their perpetual tardiness. They often possess a treasure trove of creativity and empathy, lost in delightful conversations while the world blurs into the background. They're dreamers who roll through life's scenery, appreciating textures and colors way more than the ticking clock. For them, time becomes a delicious tapestry woven together by rich experiences rather than just deadlines. Yet, let's not be mistaken, this psychological connection to time isn't all butterflies and rainbows. There's an underlying heaviness that chronically late individuals carry. They live with the footprints of embarrassment, guilt, and faint tension with loved ones. The weight of apologies can feel like lifting weights at the gym. Despite their intrinsic reliability, they often wrestle with the perception that they are flaky or unable to commit, and that battle can drain them emotionally. Digging deeper, you'll uncover a pattern. Late people often find themselves running late to events carrying emotional baggage, pressure-packed meetings or obligatory dinners rather than parties or relaxing get-togethers. Even the most exciting events can trigger this delay. Their hearts seek liberation from those internal pressures before stepping through the door. In a sense, this habit becomes a masterful coping mechanism for managing their delicate internal world. And here's the kicker. Many folks who are always late have a warped sense of future timing. In the depths of their minds lies a belief that tomorrow will magically grant them more time and energy. It's a mental concoction that leads to overcommitting and rolling back their to-do list in the hopes of catching that elusive, free moment. While psychologists have dubbed it the planning fallacy, it fundamentally speaks to the innocent optimism that lingers in their view of the future. Perhaps tomorrow truly will allow them to be a superhuman version of themselves. In the end, our consistently late friends teach us a compelling lesson about the messy relationship we have with time, judgment, and self-acceptance. Through laughter, understanding, and perhaps a dash of patience, we can celebrate their unique perspective while navigating life's ticking clock together. Whether it's because they couldn't bear to pull themselves away from a captivating moment or because they thought they had a few more minutes to spare, lateness weaves itself into the very fabric of their colorful existence. Hope can be a comforting friend, but when tomorrow arrives, the cozy blanket of hope can become a restrictive trap. People often find they still wrestle with the same habits, the same emotions, and the same struggles with life's relentless demands for perfection. It's a classic case of wanting to change but feeling stuck. However, the magic really starts to happen when someone begins untangling the threads of their own behavior patterns. Take lateness, for instance. What if it's not about the clock at all? Instead, it's about the intricate stories they spin for themselves, the emotional baggage they carry, and the invisible pressures they feel like a weight on their shoulders. There's avoidance hidden in their frantic rush, a smidge of perfectionism nudging at them from behind, and that sneaky overwhelm creeping in just when they need clarity. Understanding this tangled web doesn't magically erase the problem, but offers a compassionate lens. And, lo and behold, compassion is where awareness begins to bloom. Imagine a lifelong latecomer having an epiphany. They suddenly identify why those pesky patterns keep resurfacing, recognizing the emotional triggers and the internal dialogues that shape their sense of time. They start to see time as a reflection of their feelings rather than ticking minutes on a clock. Transitions require more emotional energy than they had previously acknowledged, and perhaps they cling to moments because letting go feels too fierce. It's a subtle transformation but powerful enough to shift their approach. Instead of battling against their nature, they begin to work in harmony with it. Instead of repeating, "I just need to try harder," they learn to ask, "What makes time feel heavy for me?" No more shameful pressure for punctuality. The focus shifts to self-awareness, transforming lateness from a source of embarrassment into a signal highlighting where emotional friction resides. It's a beautiful reframing, especially for those who have either struggled with being late or loved someone who has. Lateness isn't an affront. It's more like a peek into the emotional whirlpool lurking beneath the surface. And here's where it gets particularly human. Being late connects to that part of us which wrestles with overcommitment, lost thoughts, and the fear of judgment. It speaks to our shared experience of seeking a few extra moments before diving into the next chapter of life. When someone who's always late begins to understand their internal landscape, they start mapping out their behavior, and it triggers what makes time slip through their fingers like quicksand. Through this exploration, they realize they often rush when caught in the thorns of perfectionism, and delays creep in when anxiety rears its ugly head. The innocent optimism they harbor about their timelines tends to trip them up. The last 10 minutes before departure may appear like a black hole where time mysteriously vanishes, but in truth, it's an emotional struggle manifesting in tangible delays. Transitions take on a new meaning when the emotional heaviness is revealed. With awareness beginning to blossom, small yet meaningful changes take root not from a place of force, but rather through the gentle embrace of self-understanding. This newfound comprehension fosters a refreshing relationship with time. Instead of asking, "Why can't I get this right?" they transition to, "How do I feel at this moment?" It's a delightful shift, as they start to navigate time not like a relentless taskmaster, but rather as a partner in the dance of life. In a world where time often feels like a relentless taskmaster, some people start preparing earlier not out of fear of arriving late, but out of genuine care for their future selves. They begin to recognize the sneaky moments that derail their best intentions and tackle them with a gentle nudge rather than a battle cry. This newfound awareness leads them to an important epiphany. They need more time than they initially give themselves. It's a revelation that transforms the chase into a dance with destiny. As they shift their strategy, they stop planning based on shimmering, idealistic dreams. Instead, they take a more realistic approach. Soon, the notoriously tardy individuals find themselves surprising everyone by arriving on time for important events. It's not that they've completely changed their behavior. Rather, they've learned to embrace their quirks and work harmoniously with their nature. Time becomes less of an adversary and more of a supportive partner guiding them through life's winding paths. In this journey, they make a conscious choice to abandon the impossible quest for perfection. Their new mantra becomes a commitment to being present in the moment. Such a shift turns the everyday hustle into a mindful experience. Suddenly, understanding time becomes much deeper. It unravels hidden psychological layers, revealing emotional rhythms and unspoken fears as travelers navigate the complex territory of timing and self-belief. Interestingly, those often labeled habitually late get redefined not as flawed individuals, but as beautifully human souls grappling to sync their inner dialogues with the external chaos. Their lateness echoes the universal desire to save a life, slow down, and breathe in deeply. It's the part of everyone that feels crushed under expectations and wishes for more time on the clock to soak in the now, making their struggles utterly relatable to all. Even if punctuality isn't your middle name, you likely understand that heart-thumping sensation of feeling behind the clock. Rushing into moments feels all too familiar, accompanied by that nagging guilt of not quite measuring up to the person you wish to be. Exaggerated self-expectations and hidden exhaustion create a comedy of errors in the sincere attempts to juggle life, making lateness seem like a badge of chaotic existence rather than a character flaw. But here's the delightful twist. No one needs to be eternally trapped in this cycle of perceived lateness or emotional chaos. The key lies in recognizing the deeper emotional meanings behind their habits. A small realization can lead to subtle adjustments. These changes evolve into new rhythms that foster healthier habits and, ultimately, a wholesome relationship with time. And let's be honest, punctuality isn't the ultimate prize. It's about obtaining emotional clarity that offers back control over life's pendulum. When they finally grasp that core understanding, something profound shifts. It's an unexpected moment of tranquility when a once late individual arrives on time, not due to pressure but by simply aligning with their own rhythm. It's a quiet revelation marking a gentle transformation, not a dramatic overhaul, just a soft reimagining of their story. The essence of lateness transcends mere minutes. It blossoms into self-awareness and emotional harmony, crafting a narrative where people navigate the world step by step, side by side with time. Embracing this human experience allows individuals to discover the joy of existing not just behind or ahead of the clock, but snugly with it. Each tick becomes a rhythm, a pulse shared with time, a transformation that doesn't demand perfection but invites warmth and understanding into the way they relate to life. In this newfound alignment lies the magic that truly changes everything.